Okay, this is just a little quick tutorial. After you've, if you're in a rush and you've got a presentation tomorrow and you don't have the time to spend tweaking all the colors or making sure all the textures are exactly the way you'd like them to be, there are a couple of tricks that you can do that will save you a bit of time. Now, they're not ideal, and I'm not saying you should use them all the time, but sometimes they help. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two quick things. I'm going to look at something that Jordan submitted, which was very, very good, and something which Aidan submitted, which I think was very, very good as well. Now, Jordan, this was Jordan's great, wonderful attempt at doing one of the floor plans and the drawing that I gave you. It's beautifully done. My comment back to Jordan had been that I just think that the colors are a tiny bit too saturated. They can look extremely well on the screen, but when you print them, they can look a little bit more like a graphic exercise and less like a plan of a building. Now, if we were in a rush and we had an image like this and we thought, oh, it's a little bit too saturated. Now, I could go into all of my layers and try to tweak them all a little bit, but there is a quicker way of doing things. So I'm just going to choose. Now, I've got two versions of Jordan's drawing here, so we can do a quick before and after. And in the case of working on Jordan's drawing, the change will be quite subtle, I think. So if I look at the image and I think, oof, I think that's just a little bit too severe. It's a little bit too. The image is sort of jumping out at me a little bit, and I need to bring it down. Rather than go into all the images and adjust into all the layers and adjust them, what I can do is I can go into Image, Adjustment. I'm going to choose Vibrance. Now what I'll do is I'll bring the vibrance all the way down. So there's very little bit, or saturation all the way down, and bring the vibrance all the way up. Now I'll just get it to about there. And now I can just about tell what those materials are supposed to be. I'll choose OK. And here's the difference between the two. This is the original, this is the new. Now I might just do one other thing with that, which is come down to Adjustments, choose Brightness and Contrast. I might bring the contrast way up and the brightness down a bit. Let's see. Okay, I'll choose that. Yeah, I'll take that, I think. The timber looks much more like the kind of timber you might see on a floor and less like a representation of timber. One last thing I might do now that I've changed the vibrance and contrast and the brightness is I might just go into the vibrance again and just bring that saturation down a tiny bit more. Now that looks like the colors are very subtle on it, but it'll print better. Okay, now the other thing I'll do is just look at Aidan's fantastic effort at doing one of the sections, and I've got two copies again. We'll do it before and after. So this is the one that Aidan submitted to me. I think it's a little bit saturated. Now, one of the things is when you're working in a lot of different colors. When we were looking at Jordan's there a second ago, all the colors were pretty much brown, tan, timber. So it's quite easy to get those kinds of colors to match, and they're not going to clash too much. But when you're doing a section through a building, that can be quite difficult to do because you'll have all sorts of different things. You'll have furniture of this color, you'll have a room that's more red than blue, another room that's more blue than red, something that's very green. And you can get to the point where you've got like a sort of a carnival of colors on the screen, and it can feel a tiny bit like it's just a bit too busy and maybe not as subtle as you'd like it to be. Now, there are a few tricks. Again, we could spend all evening, the whole of Thursday evening before the presentation, going through every layer and adjusting it. But there is, if we are still working on it on Friday morning and we just don't have the time for that, there are a couple of tricks. Now, I don't advise that this is always the way you go about it, but it's something that will get you out of jail if you're stuck. Okay, now the first thing I would do on Aidan's is I would actually take the ground that he is showing out of that image, because I find that it's just too distracting. I think you're far better off just showing the ground as white. Now the other thing I'm going to do is, if I were showing this as part of a presentation, I'd crop the image a little bit so I'd be a little bit more focused on my drawing and less on all the colors that are around it. So I'd show the image perhaps like that. So now I've got the ground out and I'm focusing more on my building and less on everything that's surrounding it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Image. Whoops, I just have to make sure that the layer is selected. I'm going to go into Image, adjustments, I'm going to come down to this little thing down here, which is called color lookup, and it brings up a little box like this. Now, color lookups or color lookup tables or LUTs or LUTs are something that were developed in the photography game and are recently being used a lot in film. And what they are is if you've got an awful lot of color in your image, they're a way of matching the colors that you're using somehow tonally. So you might have a lot of blues, greens, reds, yellows, and so on. But if you use a color lookup table, what they'll do is they'll go in, they'll examine the digital information that you've got, and they'll see if there's some way to bring those colors together, either very boldly or very subtly. Now, I'll explain what I mean by just, if I do this, if I press on a little drop down here, so this is the original, press the little drop down, that will give me a 2-strip look. In other words, it focuses only on 2 colors. This on 3. A bleach bypass is very, very severe. You can go down through all of these and make up your mind which one would be the most suitable for you. Now, as you do them, when you, in their original form, as you apply the LUT, it too can look extremely severe. So we're not just going to leave it with the LUT just sitting straight on it. We're going to alter it after we've put the LUT on. Now, in this particular case, just for the sake of it, I'm going to use a teal orange LUT on Aiden's original, and that makes everything move a little bit toward, all blues and greens move toward teal, and all browns and oranges and reds move toward orange. So I'll select that. Again, it looks extremely severe. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I am going to, selecting it, I'm going to bring down in adjustments, I'm going to go to vibrance, and I'm going to bring the saturation right the way down and the vibrance right the way up. Maybe I'll just get it to there. Then I'm going to go into image adjustments, brightness and contrast. I'm going to bring the contrast right the way down, and I'm going to bring the contrast right the way down. Now, when I apply a LUT, the LUT is going to apply itself to the whites as well. So as you can see in this image, what's happened is the whites, which represent structure, are now slightly orangey. So going down to my color swatch and making sure that I've white selected, I go up to the paint bucket, and I'm going to just pick some of those whites. Oh, it got a bit of the sky, but that doesn't matter. So now the whites are popping, and I'll keep that. Now, what I would have done was I would have made sure that I hadn't affected the white of the sky if I've been working a little bit more seriously. I'll do a quick comparison between the two images, the original and the new. It makes quite a bit of difference. What I might just do, one last thing, is just go down into adjustments and go into color balance and bring it all ever so slightly over toward the blue side of things. But I don't want the blue to be too severe, so I'm going to warm up the greens a bit as well. Okay, so the sky looks more blue than green. Yeah, I think I'll take that. Okay, now it's not ideal, but hopefully, and I hope Aiden isn't completely insulted by what I've done to his gorgeous image, hopefully you'll see that it sort of tames it down a little bit. And if I have an awful lot of other drawings on the sheet, I might have other sections, and they too have a lot of different colors. I can do something like this. Now, I've done it in a very severe way to kind of illustrate that you know, how this whole system works. But if you're going to do it, you could do it in a more subtle way. It gets you out of jail on a Friday morning if you've got a presentation on a Friday afternoon. Okay, thanks a mil.